Hello there and welcome back to The Closet Historian and back to my sewing room for another project. Today I have another video from the Patreon vault of projects to share with you all, showing how I make my front high slit pencil skirts that you may have seen in a couple of my past lookbook videos. I was inspired to make a skirt like this after watching far too many mid to late 90s runway shows from Terry Mugler and Alexander McQueen, but seeing as these actually do seem to be popping up in the runway shows for the fashion week that's happening right now, I guess it's still very trendy, and I'm happy to help out. And luckily this is a very simple modification, so let's jump on over to the blue patterning table of doom and get started. And because this is asymmetric, we of course need to trace a full front, a mirrored copy of the front of my skirt pattern here. So I just have my basic block skirt, and I've traced that so that it's mirrored along the center front. And the first thing I'm going to do to this is actually bring it in from the hips down to the hem. I'm going to bring it in 2 inches down at the hem. So I'm going to taper this skirt down so it's a little bit more pegged, a little bit slimmer. Usually I do make my pencil skirts just with a straight sides, the sides straight down as opposed to narrowed like this. But for this particular design, it's already going to be a little bit on the sexier side anyway with its high slit. Might as well narrow the bottom as well. And plus the tall slit gives a lot of ease of movement, so there's no worry about that with narrowing this down. Then I'm going to draw a straight line from the tip of the dart closest to the side seam on this side, and I'm going to eliminate this other dart here. So this amount of dart fullness is 1 inch. I'm going to add a 1/2 inch to either side of this dart here, and then we can not have to worry about that one that's closer to the center front. And I'm going to curve this just a little bit here, and basically just make this one dart a little bit larger instead of having 2 over here. And of course the dart will disappear in a moment when this becomes a style line, because we've drawn that line straight from the waist down to the hem, and that will become our new princess seam line along the front of this. You've seen me do princess seamed skirts before. This is just keeping the darts on one side and putting the princess seam on the other. So again, a very simple modification today, but hopefully you will still enjoy seeing how this skirt comes together. I think the slit is going to be about 10 inches down from the waist here, which is quite tall, but that's all right, along my leg over here. And I will just cut up from the hem all the way through this dart up here, because we're going to be cutting the dart fullness away, just like I do when I do princess seams in the bodice. We don't need this anymore. Goodbye. Like so. We now have a style line, but of course, since I cut this apart and I'm going to be sewing it back together, that's right, you guessed it, we need seam allowance. So let me tape on some spare paper here and add seam allowance to this princess seam line for this skirt. Now, of course, if you wanted to, you could have this be like a dress and have the top of this have a princess seams on this side as well. If you wanted to continue the whole idea of having the dress darted on one side and princess seamed on the other, or have the whole thing be princess seamed if you want. You could do the other side of this as a princess seam too and just not sew the slit in if you wanted to. You know, options, options, options when it comes to design work. But here's my high slit skirt 2023, side front and then front like so. Now, depending on which side you want your slit to be on, you have to keep that in mind when you're cutting this out, because this pattern will work either way because you just flip the pattern upside down. Yeah. But you have to keep that in mind when you are cutting your stuff out. Now I'm just going to take a tracing of my basic skirt back as well, and then use the front as a guide to go ahead and narrow down the side the same way. That way the side seams still match up with my backs here. I'm not going to change anything else about the back other than narrowing it down. You can see I added an inch on to the hem because that's what I did on the front as well, but just basically narrowing this so I have my high slit skirt back 2023 like so. But that's the only thing I'm doing to the back. I'm leaving the darts right where they are. I'm still going to have that 1 inch of seam allowance down the center back, even though I'm not going to be doing a slit back here as well. I will just close that up and then put the zipper in the center back here. So yes, a very simple modification, just a quick princess seam onto the front of this skirt. But I do think this skirt is quite fun. Possibly because I just don't wear very many, like, I don't know, quote unquote, sexy things. So for me, this is a unique thing. But for other people, perhaps not so much. As we know, I don't really like a low neckline, but maybe I can get on board with a high slit in a skirt. But I'm just going to cut this out. Of course, in the fronts, because this is a full front asymmetric like this, I only need 1 of each of these pieces, so I don't need the fabric to be folded. I'm cutting out 1 of each of these with the, I don't know, pattern labeling up, I guess, which left me with this tiny bit of spare fabric here that I used to cut out a waistband. I'm just going to cut that at 3 inches wide and 32, 33 inches long, and I will work with that later when we come to the waistband portion of this whole shebang. This is a like light gray or white flecked wool suiting fabric from moodfabrics.com. That's right, I know, big surprise. You have seen this fabric before because I made that dress with the black patent center portion that I wore in the Shine lookbook. Or did I wear that in Synapse? No, I wore it in Shine. In the Shine lookbook was made out of this fabric, and I just love this fabric so much that I ended up grabbing more of it on Mood before they went out of stock. And I do have a little bit more, actually, of this still left to make a jacket sometime when I feel a little bit more confident about tailoring, because this is a really nice wool, and I don't mind making a skirt, but I don't think I'm skilled enough to make a really nice jacket yet. So when I feel a little bit more confident in my, like, I don't know, 1940s suiting abilities, which I should practice in order to get so, then I will use the rest of this fabric to make a jacket to match this skirt, you know, one day. But I just marked my darts that I still have on here. Of course, I still have 2 in the front, and then I have all 4 in the back. Marked my darts onto this wool, and I will sew those over here on the machine. Back on my lovely 99K. I've been using that Burnett 35 a little bit to do some stretch stuff, and I don't know, she doesn't like me any more than I like her, I think. So really, the 99 and I are best friends. And I did cut out all of my pieces, the backs and the fronts here, from a black lining fabric as well, because I'll be fully lining the skirt today. It's just a nice way to be able to finish all the stuff inside and give a bit of a weight near that slit so that things don't floop around too much while you're walking and stuff. It gives a little bit more stability to something that is this open, I guess, in the front. And then also because this is wool, I like to fully line wool, usually in general, because I don't want to end up with any itchiness. Even though with this I would be wearing, of course, like some sort of nylons or pantyhose or Spanx at the very least underneath something like this. Although I can't get away with anything that's too thigh shaping because this goes high enough that you would tell. And a lady doesn't want her secrets exposed like that, honestly. But here I am just pressing all my darts now that they are sewn. I didn't bother to show you me sewing every single dart. You've seen me sew a lot of darts. You know what's up. But I'm going to go ahead and sew the side front to the front here for my lining. So I'm just sewing the top 10 inches of this seam down to the top of the slit, basically, from the waist to the top of the slit. And I will go ahead and sew that, 12 stitches per inch, just my normal stitch length, over on the machine, 1/2 inch seam allowance as usual. And I will do the same for the wool layer as well. Of course, those need to be kind of opposite. So the wool layer here, I'm thinking about the slit being on the left-hand side, which means I need to make the slit in the right-hand side on the lining so they can have wrong sides together in the very end. Hopefully that makes any sense. Fully lining things. I know, it's always a little bit of a mind twister. It's true. But yes, 1/2 inch seam allowance, 12 stitches per inch, black thread, starting with a little bit of back stitching, stitching this all along the 10 inches, and then back stitching at the end as well. If you were worried about the slit coming, like getting a lot of tension, you could do some extra back stitching or tacking right here just to give it a bit more stability. But I don't plan to run in this skirt or run at any time, honestly. So there's that. But now that that area is sewn, the princess seam, I guess, is sewn, I can go ahead and press that open. I'm just using my tailor's ham to help me out with that because this is a little bit curvy. Not curvy enough that I'll clip it or anything, but just has a little bit of a curve to it, of course, because that dart used to be in here and it's curved over the front of the body. And like most humans, my body is not geometric. It's a curvy thing. But now that my side, front, and fronts are sewn together, I can go ahead and sew my backs onto the front at the side seams. So I'll get started with that here on the lining, and then of course again in the wool. This is a black Cupro lining. It's sort of a cotton rayon blend sort of thing. I think it's like leftover cotton fibers that they make into a rayon sort of lining kind of a thing. I always say rayon, and sometimes when I say rayon, it's lyocell, it's modal, it's all the different types of rayon, but I just lump it all into rayon. So sometimes people are like, I wish you would use lyocell instead of real rayon. And I'm like, it's all rayon to me, pal, you know? I just say rayon. It's all grouped in the same bucket in my brain. But even this, which is I think some kind of a cotton, Cupro, whatever that is rayon in my brain. So rayon lining. And we do have some blue lighting over here by the machine today. I've noticed that I had kept it on green for several videos and I need to change it up. I do wish I could change to more colors without the LED and the frame rate getting so angry with one another. But I did make a huge mistake. Oh, I'm just interfacing the bit of a waistband here with a little bit of lightweight fusible. But I did make a mistake this week when I was filming some reveal footage. Luckily, when I was filming intros over here at my desk, I had the camera set properly. But when I went over on set, I wanted to use some different colors of lighting. And in order to avoid flickering with my LEDs and the frame rate, I turned the frame rate up to 60 frames per second. Most film is shot in 24 frames per second. It's what like humans are most used to looking at when it comes to video, and it looks the most cinematic to us because that's what films are shot in. I'm interfacing the zipper area of the back of the skirt here now. But I turned my camera to 60 frames per second, but I accidentally turned it from 1080p down to 720 or whatever it is, like the lower setting. So I accidentally filmed like bad quality, but very many frames per second video for some of my reveal footage. So it'll be a little bit blurry in a couple of clips in upcoming videos on the channel. I'm very upset about that. Oops. A 1 second mistake of choosing the wrong setting, and your clips are not perfect. But you know, I guess I am human and therefore curvy and make mistakes, which is just what a combo. But I've sewn from where the zipper will end down to the hem of the skirt here, just sewn my back seam shut with 1 inch seam allowance, of course, because that's what I leave on my patterns. And here I am putting my zipper in, as you saw me do recently in that zipper video over on the channel. I can put a card up to that if you want to hear me explain the zippering process in more detail, because I did finally make a separate zipper video. But I'm just doing my lap zipper here. I'm sewing the one open side of this that's been ironed back into place, sewing that down right next to the zipper teeth here, and then I will overlap the other side and stitch that down as well. And our heater has turned off. Thank goodness. Although it is 11 degrees outside right now, so not the warmest today, down here in the office in the basement, of course. I look forward to having my sewing room / office perhaps not in a basement in the future, if possible. I don't know if basements are a thing in the Northeast. You can let me know. Are basements a thing? I grew up in California, where basements are definitely not a thing, but here in Colorado, technically, we're close-ish to the plains where tornadoes do happen, so we have basements here for safety reasons, I suppose. Luckily, I've never had to use a basement for a safety reason, just for an extra space reason, but I'm not sure if they have them in the Northeast. You'll have to let me know. But sewing that overlap side of the zipper now, and our zipper is in. Of course, I'm just setting that zipper in only to the wool layer here. I'm going to do a lot of hand finishing on this to set the lining in. You could do more machine stitching than I'm about to do, but I just figured I would want to do everything by hand. It wasn't going to take that much longer to do it by hand and finish a couple of these areas, so I'll talk through where I'm doing that. But here for the lining, I've just, again, sewn from where the zipper will end down to the hem. Again, I didn't need to leave a slit in the back because it has that large slit in the front. And I'm going to go ahead and prep a lot of things on this lining before I attach it to the skirt itself. So here I am turning the hem up an inch and then an inch again, just because it's just easier to, I don't know, iron the hem in now than it will be later. So I'm just going to press the hem in and put a couple of pins in here. And then I will press the edge of the front slit, the seam allowance of it, I guess, a ½ inch open as well. You'll see in a moment. If this would stop flooping around on me so I could get to it. And you can see how the lining wants to fray a little bit. I didn't bother finishing any of the seams on the inside of this just because it will be fully lined in the end and won't receive a ton of tension, especially because this skirt, being wool, will be dry clean only, so it's not like it's going to be thrown in the wash or anything. But you can see, yes, I just pressed the rest of my slit edges open with that ½ inch seam allowance. And then I will just fold this until it lays nicely, pin that into place for now, and then I can set this lining into the skirt at the waist, and I will basically only be connecting these two by machine at the waist while sewing the waistband on. So you'll see that in just a second. Again, I will iron the seam allowance of the slit area, I guess the breast of the princess seam that's open, which is now a very long slit in the front, here on the wool layer as well. And I needed a little bit of help from my clapper because the wool wasn't behaving instantly, but it was behaving really nicely. This was actually a very quick project to put together. Of course, this video is rather quick, but the project itself didn't take me too much time either. It was about a day and a half to put this together, but only because I was working on other stuff at the same time. But here I am, slipping my lining into my skirt. Actually, that's wrong sides together, so I'm just slipping that in there. So the right side of my lining is facing my body, and the right side of the skirt is facing outwards, of course. And I'm just lining all that up, lining up the side seams, lining up where the darts are, making sure everything is aligned properly before I go ahead and put this onto my waistband. You could base this as well first before you attach the waistband if you wanted to. I'm just going to go ahead and pin this and then pin the waistband on over it now that everything's lined up. So yes, again, here's my waistband. I actually cut this down so it wasn't as wide. This is a 4-inch wide waistband right here, actually. But I cut it back down to 3 because I was like, no, this is just going to be too wide. I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, I figured, I guess I thought I could cut out a wider waistband, so maybe I should. No, why? You don't even like them. I prefer a 1-inch wide waistband, so don't know what I was on about with that. So I cut a bit of excess off of this, but I'm just pinning my waistband on. Of course, I don't do a shaped waistband. I just do a long rectangle, so I don't make a pattern piece for my waistbands ever. I always just cut a piece of fabric that's 3 inches wide and 33-ish inches long, so I can have a little bit of extra for my 30 to 31-inch waist, depending on the time of the month, depending on the time of the day, honestly. But then I can take that over here to the machine and go ahead and stitch that on. Still same stitch settings as usual. Back stitch at the end of that. And of course the zipper is already in. The lining is floating around the zipper right now, but I'll show you how I take care of that later. But I'm just gonna, after I trimmed this down, fold it in a ½ inch, like so, and then I will pin this to the inside and I will hand stitch the edge of the waistband to the lining on the inside. So I have an invisible finish. You could, of course, top stitch from the outside or stitch in the ditch from the outside to hold this down. I, again, just thought it's not going to take that long to hand stitch this. Let's just go ahead and hand sew it. It was so nice to be working on this project after doing a lot of work with stretch recently. I've been working with lots of floopy stretch fabrics here in the sewing room. So working with like normal wool suiting fabric was a nice reprieve from the other stuff I had been working on. And you can see my hands are actually their normal color today because I haven't been doing a lot of tie-dye this last week, so they're recovering slowly. My cuticles have not fully recovered yet. We're only at like 90%. We're getting there, but I really wrecked my hands with all the tie-dye. I think it was worth it, though. I have another tie-dye video coming up at the end of this month, so you'll see the results of my geode tie-dyes coming up soon. So yes, this area here at the end, the lining is still like free and open. So after I have that waistband tacked down by hand, I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch the folded edge of the lining here along the zipper tape in the back along the inside in here, so that this will be finished and won't get caught in the zipper, honestly, because that would be very irritating. So just pinning that into place here with some new sewing pins. These are actually Japanese glass-headed sewing pins that I ordered on Etsy because I'm tired of the Dritz ones betraying me. I get like a new pack of Dritz pins, like fine glass-headed sewing pins. They're like $8, I think, and they're not worth it. They're not sharp. They bend really easily, which that doesn't actually bother me, but like the blue-headed pens you see me use all the time, they're just not sharp and not very well made, so I decided to try something else. So I'm trying some glass-headed Japanese pens here, and I think it's probably worth the investment. I haven't worked with them a lot yet, so we'll see how it goes, but better than the blue ones, that's for sure. But here I am. Now that the rest of the top of this skirt is done, I'm going to go ahead and finish this slit area. This is one of the areas where like the skirt is still open enough at the hem, you could come in here and sew this by machine if you wanted to, like have it be inside out and sew this like a normal seam. But I just decided to go ahead and finish this by hand slip stitching this area instead of having a seam in here. I just thought it might give me a nicer finish. I could kind of roll the lining to the inside just a little bit by doing it this way instead. So I just slip stitched that together off camera, the same way that I slip stitched the waistband down, honestly. I don't do a ton of like fancy hand stitching, but every once in a while I decide to do a lot of hand finishing on a project, and this was just one of those times. But here I am pressing the hem of the wool part of this. Again, I already pressed the hem of the lining. I'm just pressing the hem of the wool part of this, a 1/2 inch and then 1 inch. Again, I used 1 inch and 1 inch again for the lining, so this is going to be a little bit longer than the lining. The lining is going to hang free in here along the hem, but I did put a couple of thread tacks in just at the side seam so that it didn't move around too much, but I did want it to be free in here in case they stretched differently over time, and I could fix that easier if they were both free in here. But that is all for this skirt today. I know it's a quick one, but I hope you enjoyed seeing it come together. And here is my finished high front slit pencil skirt. And of course this does feel rather scandalous for me because normally I wear quite long skirts and quite high necklines, things like that. So higher slits showing, you know, a very small sliver of my upper thigh feels very revealing to me somehow. So I tend to pair these with like opaque or at least very patterned tights underneath like I have here. These are just outside of my comfort zone despite being pencil skirts, which we know I love. In any case, I hope you enjoyed seeing how this project came together today, and thank you to my patrons for allowing me to share this video from the vault. And as always, I'll be back with more sewing, vintage fashion, costuming, and crafting real soon, so I'll see you then. Bye!